Hey guys, welcome to today's video in our new series called Becoming Her. So I realized that like in my first video, I didn't really define what becoming her meant. And I didn't even think I really mentioned it like it was going to be a series. So yeah, it is a series called Becoming Her, which we're just going to be undertaking. And the concept of becoming her is there is no specific her. Her is anybody who you'd want to be, and that is like the best version of yourself, right? That is what we are looking at, and we're just going to be looking at different things or various things that make up or add towards your journey to becoming her, her again being the best version of yourself. So in the last video, we just talked about confidence a little bit, and I know I gave a little background story of my own story and how I progressed towards confidence, or how the Lord worked with me towards that journey. So in today's video, we're just going to be undertaking another aspect that will lead to, or that will help you rather, on your journey to becoming her. Because in this day and age, or just let's just say in your life, you really want to just make sure that you're functioning at your optimum, like you're functioning at the best level you possibly can at all times. You want to make sure whenever you go out into the world, whenever you interact with people, that you're giving out the best version of yourself out there, like 100%. In as much as you will not be 100% all the time, you may not feel like that all the time, because let's face it, life happens, right? But you just want to make sure that as you're just going throughout your day, you just want to have like to put your best foot forward, right? So without further ado, the aspect you're going to be looking at, the one thing you also need to make sure you navigate or you find out on your journey to becoming her, is knowing who you are. We may talk about, get your confidence back. We may talk about, oh, dress according to your personality. We may talk about, oh, be in your feminine, or all those things, or develop yourself, read books, learn to communicate. But I think the foundational thing here is being in your identity, like having that fullness of knowledge regarding who you are. Knowing who you are is what now, it's like it what makes you, how do I put it really? Knowing who you are is where everything else stems from. So when you know who you are, inevitably you become confident. When you know who you are, inevitably you know how to show up in the world. When you know who you are, inevitably you know how to regulate your circle or your friendships. You know how to manage your relationships. You know how to manage your emotions. When you know who you are, it's easy to go about every other thing. So you may be asking, okay, I know who I am, I know my name. Or you may be saying to yourself, oh, I know who I am, I know my name, I know what I do. But we know that's not who you are. If I ask you now, who are you? And the only thing you're going to tell me is your name. Like, you can easily change your name. People are changing names every other day. Does that mean that you are changing on a daily basis? Definitely no. You have to know who you are in the sense of your identity, in the sense of your purpose, your calling, what you're here to do. You have to know the vision you have for your life. You have to know where you're going. You may not necessarily know the details that will lead you to your destination, but you have to know where you are going. That will help in knowing who you are. So how do you get to that place of knowing who you are? Because a lot of people ask that question of, oh, what is my purpose? What then is my calling? It's a very common question out there. And the truth here is, I can tell you a whole ton of things. I can tell you you're a woman, therefore you have to be soft, you have to be feminine, you have to make sure that you communicate well, you have to make sure that you talk clean, you don't use cuss words. I can say all of those things, but knowing who you are comes from God. Like, there is no two ways about it. I cannot lie to you. God is the only being in whom we get our identity from. There's a scripture I always have in mind, which is which is the story of Deborah, and it's found in Judges 4, verse 4. And that scripture says, "Now Deborah was a prophet, a wife to Lepidoth, and she was judging the nation of Israel at the time." If you see the order of that scripture, it starts with now Deborah was a prophet. So, in as much as Deborah being a prophet was a function of her work, a work according to what God had called her to be, you can see that in that there was like identity. There is, she's a prophet, then she's a wife, and then she was judging Israel. So she was a judge, she was a prophet, she was a wife, and then she was a judge. So you see that all those things, they made up the identity of who Deborah was. So you have to know yourself. You really have to sit down with God and be like, okay, God, who am I? Who did you call me to be? I know I'm a woman, but what else makes me who I am? Who else am I? What else do you call me? Because the funny thing is, once you get into relationship with God, the things they call you, sometimes you're not yet there and you're just like, what? How am I even going to get there? But him calling you, that helps you start, aligning towards that identity he is giving you, right? Let's look at the story of Gideon, for example. The angel came up to Gideon, and the angel was basically telling Gideon he was a mighty warrior. And this guy was hiding, threshing wheat in a wine press, okay? Basically being a coward or hiding. But there is the angel of the Lord coming to him and calling him a mighty warrior. So part of Gideon's identity was he was a mighty warrior, and yet he did not even know it. So that is why you really need to go to God and ask him for who you are. Ask him for your identity. Do not let go until he tells you who you are. We live in a society where labels are constantly being put on you. People are constantly putting names on you based off of your mistakes, based off of something you may have done in your past and you regret, based off of something maybe you may have done, or maybe your circumstances or your seasons, right? People have called you names, and somehow, if you're called those names enough times, you end up answering to those names. And yet, that is not who you are. Remember the story of the men at Gadara, right? Legion. When he approached Jesus, he said, "My name is Legion because we are many." This was not the man's name. The man was naming himself according to the circumstances or what was happening around him, mainly being tortured by demons and living where he was not supposed to be. He was living in caves, living in a cemetery. Circumstances here were naming him, and the things that were happening to him, the torment, that is what he now named himself according to, right? So you don't want that. You want to make sure you're going back to God and be like, okay, God, just like you said in Jeremiah, when you're talking to Jeremiah, that you called Jeremiah, like you knew him before he was formed in his mother's womb, and you ordained him a prophet. And yet Jeremiah was saying he was too young and all of that, and yet God had already named him, had already put his identity in him, and God knew it. So trust me when I tell you, if you have not been to God, if you have not had a conversation with God, you really don't know yourself. You really do not know who you are, because it is only God cementing your identity that you will be able to really be confident in who you are. Because when you are confident in who you are, in that knowledge of who you are, you can embody it, right? And one other thing is this: everything is glittery, child. Like, you go on Instagram, you go on TikTok, everything is shining and sparkling, right? And so it's easy to kind of want to adopt what everybody else is doing, what is trending, like what is everybody else wearing, what is everybody else getting into. Do you get what I'm saying? But sometimes the path that God may be taking you, or where he intends to take you, is not necessarily all glamour. Because the work of God, let's face it, it's labor, it's work, it's exclusive. It can be something around, like, how do I put it? Like, almost restrictive. So sometimes it's not as glamorous as you might want to be. You may be like, okay, as part of my path, or part of who I want to be. Maybe I want to be a lawyer, or I want to be a clinical psychologist, whatever you may want to be. And here God is saying, no, I want you instead to be a minister of this. I want you to maybe start an organization supporting the widows or the orphans, or I want you to be serving at this homeless shelter or this orphanage. This is not something you're going to be posting on Instagram, is it? This is not something you're going to be posting on social media and be like, oh, this is my morning routine before I go to work, or spend a day with me, a day in the life of a clinical psychologist. Because this is God. So sometimes it cannot be all glamour. But then when God cements your identity, trust me when I tell you, you are inevitably, you'll be confident in who you are. It does not matter what anybody else tells you. Do you get what I'm saying? If now God comes to you and calls you and tells you you are a warrior, it means that as part of your identity during your journey of life, you're going to be fighting. But God has called you a mighty warrior, in the sense that you are going to be victorious. You'll find that once you answer to that name, once you answer to that identity, you will align yourself, even the way you approach things, the way you approach even environments. Because when you think about a warrior, this is a fighter, this is somebody who has some type of like domineering character to them, because they are used to sort of embodying a certain amount of power, because this is a mighty warrior, mind you. So even in your dressing, you will embody that warrior identity that God has called you, right? And as a woman, part of your identity, this is part of every woman's identity, is a daughter. So when you know you are a daughter and you embody that identity of a daughter, you approach life as a daughter. Everything you do, entitlement and everything, because you're a daughter of God, the Most High. Tell me you would not have the audacity to be like, I think I can go into that dealership and come out with a car, because you're a daughter. That's the confidence aspect, with a little dash of entitlement to it, okay? Because you're a daughter. So it makes up your identity, and then inevitably, you are projecting and coming out as a daughter. You are confident. You know you are favored. You know God is taking care of your needs. Therefore, you are joyful all the time. All those sunny vibes that we will talk about a feminine woman having that softness or those communication skills, all those are branches that just stem out from knowing who you are. So I may go on and on and on and talk, but I just wanted to let you know that in that on that journey of becoming her, on that journey of you becoming the best version of yourself, you cannot do that without knowing who you are. You cannot do that without embracing who you are, because it is not just knowing who you are, it is also embracing who you are, embodying who you are, and just full on walking it out, full on working out that identity, because God will call you many things, because you're going to be tackling different assignments depending on the season, depending on the need, depending on also who you are evolving to be. But know who you are. So if you don't know for sure, if you know fully well you cannot sit down and write out who you are, it's time to have a conversation with God, because it's going to affect every other thing. Because the world, there are so many voices, so many things happening, circumstances every single day. Let me tell you, every single day you live is asking you this question: who are you? And it's challenging your, maybe even your revelation of who you are every single day is constantly challenging that. Circumstances are constantly challenging that. So you really need to know. You really need to know who you are. So if you have, and you have to have that knowledge from God, not from anybody else. Don't be asking your best friend, what do you think I'm good at? Who do you think I am? No. Ask God, because your best friend knows nothing. Okay? So if you know for sure you cannot sit down and write out who you are, go have a conversation with God. It's time to have a conversation with God, because we cannot talk about every other thing without you knowing who you are. So that's it from me, guys. That's the video for today. I hope you learned something. I hope it was somewhat insightful. My name is Carol, and again, we are on this series called Becoming Her. And until we meet next time in the next video, bye for now.